Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, let's discuss BDD and Cucumber with Java, the interview preparation guide. Okay, so let's get started without wasting the time. What is BDD? BDD is a behavior driven development. Okay, it's a software development approach where business, QA, and developers collaborate using a common language to define the application behavior. BDD focuses on user behavior, business requirements, collaboration, readable test scenarios. Okay. And what is Cucumber? Cucumber is a BDD automation tool or library that allows writing test scenarios in plain English language using Gherkin syntax. It connects business requirements, automation code, and executable documentation. So why Cucumber is used? Some of the advantages of Cucumber are it is easy for non-technical people to understand, it bridges the communication gap, reusable step definitions, and it supports the automation and it supports multiple languages in the sense programming languages, and it generates the report and it improves the collaboration. Okay, and then what's the difference between BDD versus TDD? Okay, BDD is a behavioral where TDD is done with a level of unit testing, and BDD is usually written in business readable language, whereas TDD is written in a technical language. Okay, so and the audience scope for BDD is QA, development, and business, but for TDD it's developers as well as testers at sometimes. And the format of BDD is given when then, and the format of TDD is purely other test methods. Some of the tool examples for BDD is Cucumber, and some of the tool examples for TDD is JUnit or TestNG. Okay. So next, what is Gherkin? Gherkin is a language used in Cucumber to write scenarios. Okay. For example, you can see, right, this is a sample example for login functionality. Okay, login is a feature, whereas scenario needs to be validated is valid login. Okay, given user launches the application, when user enters valid credentials, then user should log in successfully. Okay, so some of the important Gherkin keywords are feature, which represents the functionality, scenario, which represents one test case, given, which represents the precondition, when, which represents the action performed, then, which represents the expected result, and or but, which represents used for readability. Okay, and continuation. And the seventh topic is about scenario outline. It's usually used for data driven testing. Okay. You can see, right? We use the examples keyword beneath the feature file, sorry, the scenario outline. And what's the difference between scenario and scenario outline? Scenario represents a single data set, whereas scenario outline represents a multiple outer data sets. And scenario is specifically used for static execution, whereas scenario outline is specifically used for data driven testing. There are no examples table for scenario, whereas scenario outline uses the examples table. What are step definitions? Step definitions connect Gherkin steps with automation code. Okay. And what are feature files? The files containing the Gherkin scenarios. Okay. And the extension of it is dot feature. What does a typical Cucumber framework structure contain? Okay. So it's a simple, right? So SRT test Java step under the Java. We'll have step definitions, runners, hooks, utilities. Project to project it varies, guys. Folder structure. Okay. And SRT under SRC test resources, we will have the feature files or the features folder. Okay. So next, what is a runner class? Runner classes executes the feature files, and this is the syntax. Okay, where we will represent the feature files and location of step definition files. using glue and feature keyword, and many other do options we do in the runner class. Okay, and some of the important Cucumber options are features, glue, and plugin, and then tags, monochrome, and dry run. Okay, so each of this has its own feature. Features represents the feature file path. Glue represents the step definition package. Plugin represents the reporting. Tags represents the tags execution. Monochrome represents the clear console output. Dry run represents the checks. Dry run checks the missing steps. Okay. So what is dry run? Okay, the purpose of dry run is checks the step mappings. It does not execute the tests. It identifies the missing step definitions. What is monochrome? Okay, monochrome, it's nothing but it makes the console output readable when it is set to true. And what are tags? Tags are usually used for grouping the scenarios. Okay, you can see, right? So there are some examples I have defined. And can you give some examples for multiple tags? Okay, so this is a simple example, a straightforward question. And what are hooks in Cucumber? Hooks execute before or after the scenarios. Okay, and then why hooks are used? Usually used for browser launching, browser closing, and screenshot capturing, and for doing the DB connections and test setup or cleanup process. What's the order of execution in Cucumber? Okay, so the first step is before hooks, and the next background, and the next followed by scenario steps, and the final step will be the after hooks execution. What is a background? Common steps executed before every scenario is known as background keyword. Background keyword is used here. Okay, and then background versus hooks. Okay. Background is specifically written in a feature file, whereas hooks are written in the code. Background is a business readable language, whereas hooks is a technical language, and code written under the hooks is a technical language. And background keyword helpful in executing the before scenarios, whereas hooks helps in executing the before or after scenarios. Okay, and then data tables in Cucumber, nothing but used to pass the bulk data. What are the types of data tables? List, map, and list of maps. What is parameterization in Cucumber? Okay, you can see, right? So we are parameterizing the admin keyword, and we are passing that as a string in the step definition. Okay, next we'll talk about the Cucumber expressions. Okay, and then we have talked about the regular expression versus Cucumber expression. And then what is glue? Glue connects feature files with step definitions. And then about undefined, pending, failed, and skipped. Undefined, pending, failed, and skipped is nothing but the console logs or the reports, guys. Okay, so it what does it exactly defines? So that is what I have written here. And what are Cucumber reports? Okay, and some of the common reports are HTML report, JSON report, and JUnit or XML report. JUnit XML report. Pretty plugin. Okay, when we enable it allows us to uh, do the readable console logs. JSON report usage, usually used for Jenkins advanced reporting and extent reports integration. And then Cucumber with TestNG versus JUnit. Okay, so the difference between TestNG and JUnit. TestNG is better for parallel execution, whereas JUnit is simpler. And TestNG contains more annotations, whereas JUnit is a lightweight and less number of annotations compared to TestNG. And TestNG is preferred in all the enterprise frameworks, whereas JUnit is preferred only in small projects. Parallel execution in Cucumber. Okay, it nothing but can execute the feature files in parallel and scenarios in parallel. It usually integrated with TestNG and Maven Surefire or Failsafe. And what are the challenges in parallel execution? Thread safety, driver management, shared objects, static variables issues. What is a Pico container? Why dependency injection is needed? And the order of Cucumber hooks, how it executes, and tagged hooks. What is a doc string? Okay, and what are the best practices in Cucumber? And we have talked about the anti-patterns in Cucumber and ideal feature file characteristics. What is a living documentation? And we have talked about the BDD lifecycle. What is three amigos mating? Cucumber framework components. And then why BDD is chosen, why Cucumber we need to choose, difference between feature file and scenario, and again it's the same repetitive questions, and the advanced framework interview topics like hybrid framework in Cucumber, how reporting works, how screenshots are captured, how logs are maintained, and some of the tricky questions like can we use multiple runners, can one step definition be reused, can background have multiple steps, can we have multiple background sections, difference between before and backward, what happens if step definition is missing, what happens if one step fails. Okay, and then next comes the Cucumber architecture flow. Okay, and then we have talked about the important Maven dependencies, and then we have talked about the enterprise level framework concepts like thread local driver, which is used for parallel execution, and the factory pattern used for driver initialization basically, and singleton pattern usually used for shared resources, configuration management, like we have handled the configuration via properties file, YAML files, and environment configurations. And some of the common problems in Cucumber projects like duplicate steps and slow execution, tight coupling, and flaky touch. Okay, so coming to the API testing with Cucumber, Cucumber can integrate with REST assured and HTTP clients. Okay, and then UI testing with Cucumber. Some of the common integrations are Selenium, Playwright, and APM. And the most interview topics are, you can expect more number of questions within these topics. Okay, see, this is the common interview answer structure that you need to provide. While answering, you need to explain with the definition and why it is used and what are the advantages of it. Explain a real-time example and the actual challenges. Okay, I have given an example on hooks here, so try to go through in the document. Very important real-time framework related questions. Okay, how do you avoid duplicate steps? How do you manage the test data? How do you run smoke suite? How do you handle the environment changes? And finally, before going to the interview, try to revise all these topics. Okay, and then these are some of the commonly asked interview questions which you can expect directly in the interview. And these are some of the important interview tips that you need to follow. So always explain with real-time framework examples. Focus more on the framework designing than syntax. Explain why concepts are used. Mention the challenges and solutions. Be confident explaining hooks, tags, scenario outline reporting, and parallel execution. Use practical examples from automation frameworks. Okay, so this is all we have for today. If you need this document, I have given a link in the description and also in the comment section. Please do check out. Okay, it's really helpful for cracking any interviews across the globe. Okay, so thank you so much for watching my video. All the best for your upcoming interview. Happy learning, happy testing.